Welcome everyone. I'm going to say thank yous back to Janine and to all our speakers. Today we've got Morven Cunningham from Leith Creative, we've got Gillian Eason from Creative Dundee, who we're going to be hearing from first up. We've got Leah Lockhart from the Democratic Society, I will get it right. Now, and we have Kate, Reid and Catherine Lido from Glasgow University, who are representing the Urban Big Data Project. Fee Scott should be along later on from MateWorks. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this event, which is Creative Innovation in Scotland, Big Ideas from Small Cities. I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Greg Singh and Dr. Eddie Borsray, who are PIs and who will set the context for today. Thank you.
When I was in university doing my master's degree in London, they used to call me the voice because I used to project and people used to go like that, you know, so maybe hold it there. You could probably hear me like that. Okay, so we've got lots of people to thank for today. What we're going to do is wait till the end to do that because we've only got so much time and we've got so many people to thank, but thank you all very much for coming along today, and also to our co-organisers for helping us with this event. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to just outline, myself and Eddie, outline some things relating to the research network that we're leading. It's an idea that was, we first started talking about it about 3 years ago maybe, so it's been maybe even longer than that. So it's been a long time in the making, and we're still exploring. And one of the things about the knowledge exchange workshops is that it fully recognises that as researchers, you know, what we're doing is we're trying to find out new things, we're trying to learn. So we're not actually coming in as experts, we're coming in as students really, as much as anything else. So just to give you a little bit of background into the Life and Data Research Network, it's a Royal Society of Edinburgh research network, and the main drivers behind it is to think about how literacy, openness, education policy and creative data innovation in Scotland works in today's social and cultural environment. So we have a few objectives as a research network, which are to map how data literacy is currently understood and how understandings can shift depending on the context, the extent to which data literacy is fostered in the education sector in Scotland and in the skill sector, what it means for local governance, education policy and lifelong learning, and what the best ways are to encourage the development of a creative and inclusive data literate community. These are all kind of very wordy, but essentially what it means is that we have a schedule of events, mainly knowledge exchange events, but also some public dissemination events as well that are coming up later on this year. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those things towards the end of the day. But here's the way in which we've addressed some of those objectives and tried to kind of find out whether those objectives are sound. So this is the first phase of our project, and this took place last year. And we had 3 knowledge exchange workshops in various places, a couple in the University of Stirling and one in the University of Glasgow. And the first one, mapping data life. How can we better embed data literacy within open data strategies of Scottish cities? So this is basically building on the smart cities objectives of the Scottish Cities Alliance and ScotGov, and in relation to some of the challenges associated with the UNESCO Smart Cities Initiative. Out of that particular meeting, a number of things arose, and one of those things was, okay, well, you know, we're mentioning data literacy quite a lot. Well, what does that mean? I'm not going to go into that right now. I'm going to pass over to Eddie in a moment to discuss some of those things. But one of the things that came out of the first knowledge exchange workshop was, okay, well, we're talking about data literacy. What does that mean? Do we know what that means? And we figured, well, actually we don't. We could do with a little bit more knowledge on that, a little bit more intel on that. So we decided to fit in an extra knowledge exchange workshop called Mapping Data Literacy. So this was defining data literacy for multiple and sector-specific contexts, and out of that came two broad definitions, one which was very much more skills-related in relation to people's everyday working lives. The other one was very much conceptual, so it was more to do with those broad social and cultural questions associated with how data literacy can be both fostered and how it can be understood in lifelong learning contexts. Incidentally, in terms of that, it worked really well. So that spontaneous idea of let's have another workshop worked really well, because we were able to bring in specific people to kind of address those questions from lots of different sectors, particularly around the creative sector, data scientists, and educators. So actually what we're trying to do at the end of today is, if there are any unanswered questions which we think, oh, actually that's something that could be worth exploring further, then we'd like to hear from you in relation to those, because we'd be open to running further events along those themes, maybe exploring things that we didn't have time to, or wrapping up unanswered questions. So the third workshop, which is labelled K2, Uncovering Data Awareness, asked the question, what are the minimum competences or knowledge bases necessary for citizens to engage with data in everyday life? So what we're seeing here is basically that question drove out of those two understandings of data literacy, one being very much kind of competence and skills based, and the other one very much knowledge based and kind of more research led, more conceptual. So on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Eddie Boyce-Ray, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what we found out about defining data literacy in our context.
Oh, great. Let me just put a bit of another one. Great. So if you want to find out more about our project, you have our URL there, and also the hashtag if you want to make some noise on Twitter. So one of the things that we thought it would be really helpful for this session was basically just try to set up the tone of what we are doing with the network. One of the things is that data can be many things. At the same time, data literacy can also mean many things. And that since these some sort of excitement around data started back in 2010, data has been approached, has been regarded by many as the new oil, as something that is handleable, something that can be traded, something that can be commercialized. Something that basically a lot of people are really interested in commodify. But the way in which we see data nowadays, it is different. And in particular, in terms of what we want to do in our network is particularly different. Is data seems to be surrounding us. Data is everywhere. The interesting part is that data, it is not as static and inanimate as oil. Data is information that is dynamic, and that information tells so much about us, the place in which we live, the institutions in which we work and we interact with each other. So in that sense, we see data from very elementary things such as bank accounts and car purchases, but at the same time as biometric, retinal scanning, and facial recognition, and other more complex mechanisms. So when we start to think about what is it that we wanted to do in our workshop, we took this as a point of departure. It was the date the group of 8 put together the idea of consolidated the idea of the Open Data Charter. And the idea was that in that meeting is that if you build it, people will come. They will make use of this. If you establish an open data infrastructure, everyone will come and make use of this. What we have seen so far is that hasn't materialized in that sense. A lot of people, it is true that they are still, they are starting to engage with open data, But so far, the emphasis has been on commercial use of consumer data predominantly. So we have seen a big gap between that some sort of portion of the population that we regard as the data savvy, and other part of the population that are not really as aware of the potentials that the data can have. So we wanted to help people to understand the complexities of the instrumental data, the data that can be used for data analysis, for statistics, for infographics, but also we wanted to, and more importantly, we wanted to help people understand this. What happens where data is heavily mediating your everyday life without you really knowing what is happening. We wanted to help them understand how data can, to some extent, influence the way in which you think and the way in which you perceive the world. So one of the things that my colleague Greg mentioned is that we have, after our first workshop, we realized, together with members of our network, that we needed to define data literacy. And what we tried to do is just bring as many different representatives from different sectors, education, or academia, industry, and we wanted to discuss what was data literacy and try to construct a definition that worked for a multi-sectoral perspective. We came up with this initial definition because one thing that we understood was, well, data literacy can refer to the kind of more instrumental skill-based approach to data, which is basically just using knowledge on numeracy, statistical thinking, and all these things to approach data and gain insight from data. But we also thought that more importantly was how are we going to explain this to people that are not as numerate as you might expect. So we decided to call it data literacy refers to the abstract understanding of data as social construct to understand the role of data in mediating our relationships to one another and to the world around us. So one of the things that we have been concerned is that our approach, and with this I will just conclude my intervention now, is that we wanted to cascade down from government to communities. We wanted to start by talking to representatives from government to start thinking about ways in which we could embed data literacy in policy and governance. And then how can we just embed that in curriculum? But during this workshop, the last one we had, we realized that the approach has to come bottom up. It needs to be coming from communities. And when communities start to understand how important and essential an understanding of data is, they can actually just push up to get it embedded within policy. So this is pretty much a little bit for you to understand the approach and set the tone of the day. So I hope you have an exciting day. Really looking forward to see what we come up from this. Thank you.